In the previous episode, the crew discovered the cause of their isolation, an alien invasion. But suddenly, one of the creatures is at large in their base. Here's the conclusion of At the Bottom of the Sea.
They eat people. There is no difference between man and beast anymore, Hans Storm tells me in the corridor. I mutter and press the intercom button. Everybody must return to their quarters and lock their doors. This is a matter of life and death. Me, Frank, and Storm enter my office. What is our plan? Frank says. What do we do when something strange and dangerous is loose among us? Storm asks. What do you mean? I reply. We kill it, Frank retorts. I think we should capture it and analyze it, Storm says. Analyze a meat-eating predator? You're insane, Frank laughs.
I was lying in my cell, half asleep, when I heard the commotion. I saw Frank approaching with a huge crowd behind him, carrying a large knife. This is it, I thought. They are going to kill me. I said nothing as the cell door opened. Frank looked at me without any pity. Hold up your hand, he said. I did, and he cut me thoroughly, so that a drop of blood slid all the way down my palm and onto the floor. I didn't scream. He pushed me out of the door, the mob following. We end up by the airlock, where Frank ties me to a chair. Then they all suddenly leave, and I am left alone. What are they going to do to me? I wiggle back and forth in my chair until it falls over. I am partially free, then fully. I am free, but then I hear a hissing sound behind me and turn. There I saw the most hideous creature I have ever seen, a tall, spider-like monster with thickening jaws, crouching up as if ready to jump and tear me to pieces. I knew they were doing something to me, but this seemed unreal. I froze completely. Then suddenly, the door to the airlock slammed shut and the pressure started to increase. Both me and the monster fell to the floor, wriggling in pain.
I looked at the creature and at Arbelson. Then I looked at Frank's smiling face. Was he really enjoying this spectacle? The whole thing made me sick. Whatever he had done, would it justify this? And who was I, to be judge, jury, and executioner? I was no saint. I had done things in the service of the state of which I was not proud. In a way, the state had bought my immortal soul, if there was such a thing. I started to sweat. Gunshots from years back echoed through my mind. My hands shook. The others were looking at me, I know. Then I suddenly grabbed the lever and normalized the pressure. Arbelson crawls into the submarine. We hear him unlocking it and drifting off. I increase the pressure again until we are sure the monster is dead. We were safe, but we were now completely isolated at the bottom of the ocean.
Inga and I were trying to communicate with the little girl. It seemed impossible. Inga and I could barely communicate with each other. She talks more than you have lately, Inga says. Why are you so cold? She asked. I told her we didn't like lesbians in Islam. Then she shook her head and said something astonishing. Don't you understand that there is no Pakistan anymore? There is no Jerusalem or Mecca. What do you mean? I replied. All there is me and you and us down here at the bottom of the sea. and those insect creatures at the surface. I had never thought about this. I got up and left without saying a word. I returned to my quarters and pondered all that I had lost. I thought about my aging father, who introduced me to my husband for the first time and ordered me to marry. Then I remembered what sort of man my husband was. And then I sighed, partly with relief.
The room is completely illuminated by surgical lights. Every detail of the monster's slimy insides were visible on the table. Storm had done a thorough autopsy. We were both wearing every sort of protective clothing that we could think of. As we cut the creature's brain, Storm paused for a moment. "This is strange," he said. "The body is organic, but the brain seems to be some sort of computer." "What are you going to do with this?" I asked. "Freeze some tissue samples, scan and photograph it with the instruments we've got, and then cremate the rest. We're not taking any chances."
I was sitting in my quarters when Schultz popped in for some reason. I am not scared of him. He cares more for machinery than he does humans. He wouldn't hurt a fly, or ever make any approaches towards me. I was playing with a matryoshka doll, one of those old Russian toys. "This is me," I said, and placed the smallest doll on the bed in front of him. "These are my quarters," I said, and placed the doll inside the second smallest. "This is the base and Valhalla," I concluded, and put that inside the next one. "And this is the ocean." Suddenly, Schultz gets a weird look on his face, as he is half choking. He gets up and runs away, and later that evening he thanked me for coming up with some new idea for looting Valhalla, the sunk oil rig. He really is weird.
As I look at Schultz, who is standing next to me here in the control room, I am struck by his immense creativity. It seems like his mind is constantly working on technical issues. He doesn't know the first thing about emotions, though. Somehow, I never even think he has had a girlfriend. Valhalla is tilted. Our sensor can't pick up what's on the other side, but Schultz came up with the idea of combining the cables of the broken ROVs to extend their range, and now we can penetrate the dark waters out there. As we come around the side, we see a shadow of something resting on the sea floor. Another downed fishing vessel. As we get closer, we realize that it is in fact the other submarine that is normally kept as a backup on Valhalla. We use the mining equipment to tow it back to our docking bay.
I don't know why they always select me for these suicide missions. I am about to open the hatch to the other submarine. There is air inside, but there might be creatures there. We don't know. I have Edwardson's gun in case. The doors are locked behind me, so I'm cut off. As the hatch opens, the stench of rotting flesh overwhelms me. I still enter, though. There is battery power, and the lights come on. I see 2 dead bodies, but no monsters. I check everywhere, but there is nothing. It looks like they killed themselves. There's a suicide note saying they would rather die like this than starve to death. I call on Edwardson.
There were 2 men in the submarine. One was the pilot. The other was a man in a suit. "Say hello to my superior," I said, "the Minister of Defence." 2 weeks later, we have a working submarine, largely thanks to the ingenuity of Schultz. He worked day and night, welding, hammering and knocking. He was covered in grease and oil, and he was always so concentrated on his work that we couldn't get a word out of him at lunch. But in the end we were ready to go to Tromso, the fuel depot for submarines, the only place that our Belson could have gone.
Why the Colonel decided to go on this trip, I cannot say. Perhaps he wasn't willing to sacrifice anyone else. Perhaps he wanted to keep an eye on me and prevent me from killing Abelson. I don't know. But we sailed in the morning and reached Tromso in the afternoon. In the faint winter daylight, we see the bridge partially collapsed and the famous Arctic cathedral with its roof blown off. We dock at the submarine base in Breivika, next to Abelson's boat.
So, we have all returned to the place where we all made our preparations. But look at it now. What is left? The area around the port is largely intact, but every house and every building is damaged a little. We find a high lookout point in a nearby building and scan the surrounding area with our binoculars. We keep a watch out for the creatures. There seems to be some activity around the entrances to the city's underground road system. The creatures must have collected what they were after, for the town seems abandoned and desolate. Perhaps we should just take the other submarine and leave.
After a few hours of patient waiting, I suddenly caught a glimpse of Abelson. He was holding a hunting rifle up by the hospital. What was he doing there? I decided to ambush him as he passed by the other side, and I ran up some back roads as fast as I could, carrying Edwardson's gun. Abelson is very careful. He checks every angle before he passes. Obviously, he has learned a few tricks about avoiding the creatures. "Stay where you are," I shout and point my gun at him.
I don't know how they managed to get ashore, but there Frank was again, with his evil grin preparing to do me in. Fortunately, I am quick on my feet, so I jumped behind a wall as he fired his first shot. Then I ran as fast as I could down the tunnel entrance where I knew the creatures would distract him. But suddenly I was cornered between the advancing Frank and the lair of the monsters. I could see Frank taking his aim, so I ran into the dark tunnel.
So, he chose the creatures over a bullet in the head. Perhaps I should let him go. Still, maybe he's just playing some kind of game again. Maybe there's no creatures in there after all. I couldn't take the chance, so I follow him into the tunnel. There was lighting in the ceiling, oddly enough, but not man-made light. Translucent goo sticking to the walls. There were waste products on the road face, some kind of organic slime. There's a noise. I better hide. It's not Abelson, but one of the creatures. I stand absolutely still in the shadows as it passes. Further down the tunnel, I see two spiders spinning rugs on the wall every 25 meters. The creatures do not look like anything I have seen before.
I have him now. He is standing not far from me in the shadows. I cannot risk a shot. I will cut him down with my knife. I make a slashing movement, but Frank is quick and is only cut slightly. It is enough to make him twitch in pain, though. Suddenly, he falls backwards towards one of the rugs on the wall, and it seems to swallow him whole. "Frank," I whisper. I lean forward, and suddenly Frank emerges from the rug and lands two punches on my face. I fall backwards. He stops and looks at the rugs. What are these? Portals to somewhere else, he asks. I think they are storage spaces that exploit a hidden dimension in space, I say. As I get up, a creature jumps from the dark and bites Frank in his leg. This is my chance. I run out of the tunnel, but then I stop. For some reason, I grab my rifle and run back. I take aim at the creature and shoot it right between the eyes. It rolls over in a ball.
So he returned to save me. He is a puzzle, all right. Let's grab one of those rugs, I say, and start pulling it off the wall. The two of us hurry back to the submarines where the colonel is waiting. He is shocked to see us, of course. What is that? He asks and points at the rug. You will see later, I tell him. The submarines were ready, but I had to ask Abelson something. You saved my life. I will tell them that when we return to the base, I tell him. I would rather take my chances out there, don't you think? Abelson answers. I can drift from port to port and live on what I find. Oslo has been wiped out, I have learned that much, but somewhere out there might still be someone alive. And run from these creatures all the time, I reply. Yes, why not? Behind Abelson's back, Edwardson grabs a nearby wrench. He hits Abelson over the head, who falls unconscious. Why on earth did he do that? I said, stunned.
There Frank is. This time is hurt again. He is such a careless guy. I rush to support him through to his quarters. This time I place his hand on mine and smile. I knew you would take care of me, he replies.
I didn't come to my senses before we were well out at sea. They had tied and gagged me and put a hood over my eyes, so it was all pitch black. I fell asleep. I woke when we arrived, and then Gunderson untied me and followed me to this cell where I am now. There was no point in resisting. Gunderson is a huge man. A little while later, the colonel arrived to gloat. He looked at me through the bars like a tourist studies an animal in a zoo. Why didn't you kill me? I asked. My dear Abelson, now that the world is slowly dying, every life is precious, even yours. Suddenly, I started giggling. It was funny in a way, then laughed as heartily as I ever have in my life.
I left Abelson to his insanity. He didn't know it, but his discovery of the blanket had enlarged the base and slightly increased our chances of survival. As I walk down the corridor, I feel pensive but calm. Suddenly I hear somebody talking, and I turn to a doorway. In a room I see the mute girl lying on a bed. Hans Storm and Inga kneel in front of her. "Will you not tell us your name?" Inga asks. The girl does not reply. "Oh, well," Storm says patiently, "I think we'll call you Leonora. Some piece of life always survives even the worst disasters. But the strength of man, like our hidden base, really lies at unfathomable depths."
You have just heard a radio play written, produced and edited by Michael Henry Quinn. The narrator, Peter Edwardson, was played by Peter Yersley. The diver, Frank Hansen, was played by Christer Brandser. Julie Hoverson was the cook, Fatima Ali, and George Snow was the villain, Henrik.